I have been a biological survey technician for 11 rotations. In that time, I have processed 641 intake assessments for the Velsorvan Biological Survey post. I have never filed a correction to one of my own reports. I am filing one now. The subject arrived on the 0630 freight manifest as a civilian cargo inspector attached to the Drevketh Humanitarian Resettlement Corridor. Name, Marin Dre. Species, human. Classification applied at intake. Class 49 Deathworld origin. Vel Duran registry. She carried a transit credential, a personal effects satchel, and a second satchel containing documentation for 17 freight amendments she said needed countersignature before the corridor's next departure window. My supervisor, Senior Assessor Vel Saran, authorized a full biological survey as a condition of corridor access. Standard protocol for Class 40 and above. We do not let Deathworld biologicals into active freight corridors without a complete assessment on file. The survey takes approximately 4 hours. The subject was informed of this and asked if she had any questions. She asked where the water dispensary was. I showed her. She filled a container, sat down in the intake chair, and began reading through her freight documentation while we prepared the survey array. I want to note, for the record, that nothing about Marin Dre's presentation triggered any concern during this portion of the assessment. She was unremarkable, small. She had a patch of dried adhesive on her left forearm from what appeared to be a transit seal label that had been improperly removed, and a faint pressure mark across the bridge of her nose, suggesting she wore magnification apparatus during reading. She smelled faintly of recycled corridor air, and something I later identified as a caffeinated grain beverage common to Vel Duran transit hubs. She looked like a woman with paperwork and a long wait. We began the assessment at 0648. The Velsorvan Biological Survey Array is the most current instrument of its type in Sector Drevketh. It was calibrated 18 days prior to this incident by a certified Drevsovan technician. It has processed assessments on 43 species without instrument error. I have run it myself for 6 of those 11 rotations. I know what its error states look like. I have seen every variant of instrument fault this array can produce. They look different from what I saw that morning, and I knew it then, and I logged it as error anyway. The first anomaly appeared at 0641, during the cardiovascular stress modeling phase. The instrument projects a graduated physiological load across a standardized biological response matrix. Essentially, it models what a subject's cardiovascular system would do under a sequence of increasing environmental stressors. The output is a percentile rating against the species baseline. For a standard biological, readings above the 95th percentile are flagged for medical review. Marin Dre's cardiovascular stress reading hit the ceiling at the second stress tier and stayed there. I reran the assessment. Same result. I logged it as instrument error and moved to the next phase. The muscular load assessment produced a ceiling result on the third tier. The bone density modeling exceeded the instrument's measurement range entirely and returned a null value, which the system logged as a calibration fault. The pain response simulation, a low-level neurological projection that maps a subject's anticipated response threshold to various degrees of physical stimulus, returned a graph I did not immediately understand. It took me a moment to recognize what I was looking at. The graph was flat, not flat in the way a malfunctioning sensor returns flat data, flat in the shape of a subject who had registered the stimulus, processed it, noted it, and continued. In 11 rotations, I had not seen a flat pain response graph. I did not know the instrument could produce one. I flagged this for Vel Saran. I did as I was told. I want to state clearly that I followed the correct supervisory procedure. I raised the anomaly. My supervisor made the determination. I logged what I was directed to log. I want to note, again for the record, that during the entirety of the 4-hour assessment, Marindre did not comment on the survey array, the readings, or the length of the process. She worked through her freight documentation with a stylus, making notations in the margins. At one point, she asked me if the dispensary had a second type of beverage. I told her it did not. She thanked me and returned to her paperwork. At 10:43, I presented her with the completed survey form for signature. She read it. Not quickly. She read the entire document, including the technical appendix, including the raw instrument logs, including the flagged readings I had logged as equipment variants. She read it the way she had been reading her freight documents all morning, careful, thorough, unhurried. Then she signed it. She said, "You'll want to check the calibration code on Phase 3. It's printed on the lower housing. Cross-reference it against the variance log on page 7 of the appendix." I stood at my station for a moment. Then I pulled up page 7 of the appendix. The Phase 3 calibration code is a 12-character identifier printed on the lower housing of the survey array. It identifies the instrument's current calibration profile and sealing parameters. If the code in the instrument log does not match the code on the housing, the instrument is operating outside its registered calibration window, which means every reading it produced during that window is legally provisional, not final, and cannot be used as the basis for an access decision. The code in the log was the calibration profile from 18 days ago. The code on the housing was different. The instrument had been recalibrated 4 days ago during a routine post-maintenance cycle. The updated profile had been applied to the hardware, but not pushed to the logging system. The variance I had been told to attribute to equipment fault was not equipment fault. The instrument had been reading accurately. It had been reading accurately the entire time. What it had read was this: a human cardiovascular system operating at sustained output levels the instrument was not built to measure. All of this was accurate. The instrument had told us exactly what Marandre was. We had logged it as error. I pulled Velsorin from his desk. I showed him the calibration code discrepancy. He looked at it for a long time. He said, "Where is she now?" She was already in the corridor. The corridor access tokens she carried opened the freight assessment annex, the document processing bay, and the secondary cargo lock. They also, as I confirmed when I checked the token log 12 minutes later, opened the post's administrative filing room, a room which stores the primary access records for all 17 relay stations in the Drevketh resettlement corridor. The filing room log shows she was in there for 9 minutes. The freight amendments she left on Velsorin's desk, all 17 of them, countersigned as requested, contained a notation in the remarks column on each one. The notation cited the provisional reading clause in the Vel Duran Survey Authority's own assessment protocols. Section 4, Subclause 11. Any access decision made on the basis of a provisional biological assessment is itself provisional and subject to review upon correction of the underlying instrument log. She had cited the clause before I had even found the calibration discrepancy. She had known the code was wrong before she signed the form. I have been trying to establish when she identified the calibration fault. The survey array's housing is visible from the intake chair. The code is printed in the standard 7mm Survey Authority font. It is not large. She would have needed to read it from approximately 3 meters during the setup phase, while I was preparing the array, while she was apparently reading her freight documentation. She had been reading both. I am filing a correction to my assessment of case number DW49-0001. The instrument was not malfunctioning. The readings were accurate. The subject was assessed correctly. The error was in how we chose to interpret what the instrument told us. The remarks column on the correction form has space for one line. I wrote, "The survey told us what she was. We decided not to believe it." I do not think I will be filing another correction for some time. I do not think I will need to.